Yep. Could I have your attention, please? Hey. He beat you to it. That's impressive. That's pretty impressive. Hi, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for talking loudly and enjoying each other. This has been so much fun, you guys. This has really, really been good. We're gonna do a little program. We're just gonna have some people that are gonna share and talk and about life and memories and kind of whatever they want to. There really is no like requirements for what we're gonna say. So it's going to be me and then Grant and then my mom and then Mike Bowers and then Kice will back clean up. It's technically fifth, but whatever. It's still clean up. That's fine. Kice and I were talking about the order last night, and we said it should gradually get better as we go. And she said, "You go first." I said, "Okay." That's not what happened at all. I definitely volunteered to go first. Oh, man. Okay. I remember meeting John for the first time when I was 7 years old. I can actually tell you where I was standing in the old church building when it happened. "Hello, my name is John Walker," he said. It's weird, right? He was saying it even back then. My grade school self could not possibly have foreseen the impact that first encounter would have on my life. I have a lot of memories growing up, listening to John preach and teach. I have favorite stories that John has told. Jeremy and the plastic egg, which if you don't know, please ask because it is such a good story. I have so many favorite jokes. I'm only going to tell you one that came to mind when I was preparing, okay? This is a classic. A mother skunk had two kids that she named In and Out. Whenever in was in, out was out. And whenever in was out, out was in. One day out was in, but she couldn't find in anywhere. She looked everywhere for in. Up, down, left, right. She could not find in. Finally, she asked out to find in, and out went right to where in was hiding. And the mother skunk asked out how he knew where to find in. He replied, "Easy. In stinks." That's a classic. That's so good. Oscar Wilde said, "Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery that mediocrity can pay to greatness." After watching John for my formative years and with his and my mom's encouragement, I decided to go to Bible college. In my first preaching class, I stood up to give my first sermon and I read the whole thing. The professor, Lee Mason, told me I couldn't do that, that I needed to preach extemporaneously, which I had to have him define for me. I explained to him that it was the only way that I knew how to preach. That was the only style of preaching that I'd ever seen. Professor Mason said, "But you need to leave room for the Holy Spirit to work." But having previously talked with John about his preaching style, I decided to challenge back. I said, "Professor Mason, does the Holy Spirit know who will be in the room before I give a sermon?" And I think he instantly knew where I was going. I continued, "Doesn't it reason then that he would know exactly what needs to be said when I am writing it down the day before?" For the rest of that semester, I was allowed to read most of my sermons. True story. I have so many fun memories with John over the years. My best friend, Angelo, catching a football pass while running full speed, wrapping his arms around the clothesline pole in the backyard of the Walker's house. Oh, man. To this day, Angelo still swears he held on to that ball. We used to hang out at the Walker's house a lot for youth group stuff. I remember standing in their living room, reciting books of the Bible as fast as I possibly could, competing against Jason Polochuk. I can beat just about anybody, but not Jason, not even once. I remember many years of softball championships and many years without. I remember being much younger, watching John play and thinking, I hope I can make plays like that when I'm that old. I am that old now. Jury's still out. I remember our mission trip to the Dominican Republic, where we had to travel and sleep in air conditioning and eat buffet-style meals. Hard times, you guys. Seriously, though, I remember watching John on that trip. He just serves all the time, whenever and wherever possible, not just on mission trips. It's just his way of life. If there is a job to be done, he is going to volunteer to do it, especially if it's a dirty job that no one else wants to do. There is nothing that is beneath him. My favorite passage of Scripture is Philippians 2, 3 through 11, and it says this: "Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility consider one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, though he existed in the form of God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant and being born in the likeness of men. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, death on a cross. For this reason, God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee will bow, of those who are in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and that every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father." I don't know if that's one of John's favorite verses, but I do know that his human example of living this out is one of the best I've ever seen. His humility and leadership is unrivaled. His desire to put others' needs above his own has been the cornerstone of his ministry. This is maybe most true at Mountain View Christian Camp, where we have spent many weeks together during the summer. John has preached countless times at camp because that's where we want him, teaching and presenting Jesus to students in ways that draw them closer to him and yet leaves them wanting more. And yet, if you think that the most hours John has logged at camp are behind the pulpit, you would be mistaken. Because where he is often found is doing the job that nobody else wants to do, dishes. It's sweaty and gross, and most people do everything they can to avoid that job. I don't think John has ever been asked to do it, and I also think that no one has ever done it more. He just goes in and does the job that needs to be done. John, thank you for being, to me, the best example of humility and servanthood. I hope to be like you someday. When I have faced difficult choices, I have sought his counsel. In the hard moments of my life, John has been there with physical presence and words of encouragement. Weddings, baptisms, funerals, all of the moments in life that matter the most, John has been there. When I was a kid, I used to think of John as my minister and preacher. And I don't remember when, it was a long time ago, but I remember realizing for the first time that John was also my friend. And that friendship has been one of the most meaningful relationships in my life. We've been talking about some of the sayings that John has while we were getting ready for the party. One of the ones that you have always said to me over the years is, "I owe you." And while I've always appreciated the sentiment, it could never be true. It is I who owe you, a lot more than I could ever repay. John, thank you for choosing to live a life that so accurately represents the life Jesus lived. Thank you for your service to me, my family, and thousands of others through the 42 plus years. It has truly been an honor to do life with you. Let's keep doing.
So Kice may not have said that to Eric, but Eric said to me, "You're going second." So there may be some truth to the story after all. Good to see everybody here. Thanks for coming. People from near, from far, from many different eras within our church. Marissa had said ticket sales were going to be hot. Kind of like the guy who started a side business building boats in his attic. It was successful. Sales went through the roof. I picked up a lot of jokes here over 25 years or so, not all of them great. My parents moved to Colorado many years ago, and over the years I've enjoyed calling my dad after church on Sunday and sharing the funny ones with him. Sadly, I haven't been able to do that since March of 21. Not because anything happened to my dad, but because there haven't been any funny ones. So, Mike was ahead of me. Mostly groaners like, were you here when John told this one? Where do bad rainbows go? To Prism. Not for too long, though. It's always a light sentence. Yeah, just long enough for them to reflect on what they've done. So let's reflect for a little bit. As I mentioned, I've been coming here for about 25 years. I was asked at one point by Bill Clements, if any of you, I think it was Bill, if any of you know Bill, if I would serve on the stewardship committee. I did. Then John asked if I would take on the role of financial secretary, which I did with Sandy, as you all know. Then John asked at some point if I would be an elder. And this was after we had met several times, and he made sure to pass on a few axioms of his, like kingdom work is uphill, and it's easier to steer something that's moving, And a really good thing to say to God is, okay, I'll try. So he was pretty smart in his approach. I didn't realize this was all leading up to something. But even with that, I still said I didn't think I was qualified to be an elder. And that's when he said, that's who usually makes the best elder. So, he cornered me then. So I said, okay, I'll try. And I'm so much better for having said, okay, I'll try. Like most of you, I've learned from and have been shaped by John over the years. I've loved the sermons, biblical, practical, and fast-paced. I've said that John's ruined it for me to go to other churches. They are so slow. They don't always have a practical application. They're not always about getting to know Jesus and how much he loves you. But then along came Jacob, and wow, there's another guy who I can listen to and learn from. So we are so lucky to have had John and now Jacob. I said a few things at John's 40th anniversary celebration that I'm going to repeat because I realized I was coming up with the same thing again anyway, and most of you weren't here, so it's going to be new to you. So I once heard at a high school graduation that the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you figure out why. And as you can imagine at a high school graduation, the context was around finding the right field of study, finding the right career, and if you figure that out, it sure can be rewarding, even life-altering. And figuring out that you want to be a teacher or an accountant is great, but figuring out that Jesus loves you so much that he allowed himself to be humiliated and crucified on your behalf, that is really life-altering. And John has been formally helping many people realize this over his career, including all of us here. So we know it's not John, it's Jesus that deserves the praise, but John puts on a good face here and now. In the years I've spent with John, hopefully I've become more like him because John has spent his life trying to be like Jesus. Proverbs 13:20 says, "He who walks with the wise will become wise, and anyone who's hung out with John and has tried has become more wise." So that's the thing about someone who's genuine. What John preaches on Sunday is what he lives during the week. And every time he bumps into someone is a chance for them to become wiser, whether it's at big things like weddings and funerals, or like hospital visits or sporting events, or even the smaller things like on the pickleball court, at the grocery store buying yet another bottle of Dr. Thunder, sometimes just on the side of the road talking to yet another cop. So John sees and shares Jesus in everything. My wife always comments about John's stories, and especially about movies, and John will say it's a perfect metaphor. People were in trouble. They didn't have any way out. They needed a hero to come save them. He did. They're forever grateful. It's exactly about Jesus. And we'll say, oh, I thought it was about a boat. So maybe we need to hang out with John and Jesus a little bit more, but having hung out with John in an official capacity for a while, I can tell you there's no one more genuine, no one more interested in helping others know Jesus, no one who cares more about their congregation, no one who makes themselves more available to others, dance recitals, football games, soccer games, ice skating, musicals, concerts, counseling sessions, hospital visits, and the most serious of sacrifices, potlucks. Only to be topped by retirement party potluck combinations, probably. So, thank you, John and Linda, for serving us for all these years. We wish you the absolute best in retirement and the future. No one deserves it more. You have your Saturday nights free again and more, but a caution to Linda. A retired husband is often a full-time job in itself for the wife. So I was curious what else was in store for you guys in your future, so I went to see a psychic to see if I could get a glimpse of what your future had for you. It was a very overweight psychic. It's okay, she told me I could say this, but she was very overweight. She had 2 double chins. She was a fortune teller. Okay? She did say she was about to start an exercise program doing diddly squats. And then I mentioned to her that I got a little something for John's retirement, and she said she knew what it was. And I said, how can you possibly know that? She said, it's a gift. So John, thank you for spending your life telling everyone about the best gift ever from the best guy ever. So may he continue to bless you guys for a long time. Congratulations, best wishes, you've earned it.
Well, at first I was glad I was going third, but now But now I realize I don't have any of John's jokes to tell you, and I didn't include a scripture verse, so I don't know. We'll just see how this goes. So, our family started attending Victor Church of Christ in 1985 when Eric was 7 and Allison was 5. We were warmly welcomed by that group of friendly Christians in that little church on the hill, and some of them are here tonight. It's so nice to get to see people again. I was immediately impressed by John's preaching. He was still very young, but his sermons were both interesting and biblically sound. The fact that he packed so much into 20 minutes was also impressive. However, I did have one small problem with his presentation. I'm from Southern Ohio, and we talk slowly there. And there were some Sundays when I was sitting there thinking, I can't listen as fast as he talks, but I learned to adjust, so that was good. And he's gotten better through the years. He really has. Lots of times I've taken notes on his sermons, and what I really appreciate is he bases his sermons on scriptures and always leaves you with something to think about. It's not just ear candy that you hear and forget, but I find myself saying, yes, that's something I can work on this week. So he challenges us, and he sets the example for how we can grow spiritually. When I was a young girl, our family went to a small church in Ohio. Because my dad was the head elder, he was caught up in the drama when not one, not two, but 3 of the preacher families in a row were accused of either the husband or the wife being involved in infidelity. Whether it was true or not, I don't know, but it did great damage to the church. The 3rd time, the church split, and the stress of trying to hold things together after such devastation almost killed my dad. With John and Linda, they have spared us this drama. Their obvious love and commitment to each other have set the example for married couples through the years. It's hard to express what a gift that is for a congregation when the preacher's marriage is rock solid. They've also set the example of creating a godly family life and raising 2 great kids, and we're very grateful for that. John and Linda have also set the example for us by living modestly and being financially responsible. They've lived in the same house and driven second-hand and third-hand and maybe fourth-hand cars and maintained a simple lifestyle that shows where their priorities are. Of course, those second-hand cars keep breaking down and causing lots of trouble, but that's given John many sermon illustrations through the years. So maybe there was a method to his madness. And speaking of sermon illustrations, whenever John speaks of Linda or Kice or Jesse or any of his family, it's with respect and love. He never uses them as a bad example or to make fun of them, as I've heard other preachers do. And that's such a good thing. John helped our family personally many times through the years, either by being a sympathetic listener or giving wise advice. I've told this story before, but he gave me some good advice for Eric when he was about 9 or 10. Some of us from the church went to a Red Wings game, and that happened to be playing the farm team for the Cincinnati Reds, which was Eric's team. So while most of the crowd were cheering for the Red Wings, Eric was yelling his head off in favor of the other team, and he was getting some dirty looks. So I was starting to feel embarrassed, and I'm trying to get him to calm down a little bit, and John leans over and says, "Oh, let him yell. Someday he may need to know how to be the only one standing up for something." So good advice. He's also been there for our family when we've lost a family member, and that has been so helpful. In fact, in the sermon he preached at my husband Carl's funeral, he said something honest and direct that brought about reconciliation between our family and another part of the family where there had been a rift. And we've been enjoying being part of each other ever since. Even though we are not related by blood, John, Linda, Kice, Jesse, and the rest of the Walker Freeze families have always felt like family to me. And that's a good thing now. So even though he won't be our preacher anymore, we are still all part of the same family. And that relationship can continue on into the future. Thank you, John and Linda, for who you are and all that you have done for our family of believers. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mike Bowers. I'm from the Clarence Church of Christ. I haven't batted cleanup in a long time. I bring you greetings from the Clarence Church of Christ and from the people there where John was raised. Not that I was there and had anything to do with it, but there is definitely a sense of pride, buddy. We're all proud of you, grateful for you. Well done. Okay. 45 years of friendship, partnership, and life, and they gave me 5 minutes. But John and Linda, there's a definition that you know that maybe only a few other people in the room know. These are 5 Central American minutes. Okay? That means we'll get done when I get done, right? And you're going to like it. Just like rice and beans. Okay, I'm going to hurry. One of the great blessings of the partnership of the churches in New York State is what we find at Mountain View Christian Camp. I'm forever grateful for your dad, Jim, and those guys that were with him that envisioned the camp property and developed it so that today we get the benefit and blessing of it. Forever grateful. Okay, so at one point in my life, they said, okay, Bowers, we appoint you to lead a week of camp next summer. And Lord, what are they thinking? And Lord, help me to make this the best week of the summer for those kids. I don't care if they go to Disney or anywhere else, help this to be the best week of the summer. Help me to do that. I need your help. And early on, I learned to make 2 phone calls when it was my turn to lead. One was to John and Linda. I knew if I could get John and Linda to come, I was on easy street. It's going to be good. It'll be fine. The other one was a guy that some of you remember, Darren Brown. If I could get both those parties to say yes, it was golden, and it always was. If they came, it would be fantastic. As you can imagine, I always wanted John to speak as often as possible, but it was far more than the Bible truth that he taught in carefully crafted messages every night after all the other people went to sleep. Somehow he came up with a handwritten message that was appropriate, right on the money, every time. But it was more than that. I wanted John and Linda to be there because of the model they were for kids. So here's what happened. It happened organically, but I started watching, and it's almost like I'm going to take credit for this because this is my idea. John and Linda, go sit at a table. Find the kids that nobody talks to, nobody wants to be around. First time at camp, they're scared, they don't have any friends, there's something going on in their life, I don't know what, and they're uncomfortable. And just watch what happens. And John and Linda sit at the table, and they have a meal with this group of kids, and in just a matter of seconds, there's laughter, and the kids are drawn in, and maybe for the first time they're around somebody who's Christ-like, and the magic starts to happen. And abundant life in Christ is magnetic, and it's contagious, and it's in John, and it's in Linda, and then these kids are saying, "Ooh, I want to sit beside them next time," and that's going to be my goal. And if you watch it, you find that, okay, all the other tables now have got up and they're out throwing the frisbee or, playing catch or sitting on the porch swings. But this table, this group of people where John and Linda are still there. They're still talking, they're still laughing, they're still having fun. And yeah, I'm really smart. I thought up that idea. Brilliant, right? So much to say. When you need to take a long road trip, which I have with John numerous times, I want John not to drive, but to be in the back someplace. And students get on, and of course they're uncomfortable. They don't know anybody. They're nervous. They're among strangers. They're maybe leaving their mom and dad for the first time out in this mission trip or wherever we're going. And just put John in the mix and give it about 10 minutes. And first there's laughter, then there's serious questions. Then, of course, there's riddles. There's riddles, all kinds of riddles. And there's games, mind games, and there's music, and there's Bible, and there's movies, and there's Jesus, and there's life. And Eric and Jesse and John, I don't remember what the question is, but the answer is Jack Morris. Don't forget Jack Morris. In your retirement, John, Jack Morris is the answer to that Bible or that baseball question. And you had to be there. John and Linda, wherever the Lord leads you, know this. If I'm asked to lead a week of camp at Mountain View again, please do not change your phone number. I'm calling you. Okay, 1995, I'm asked to lead a mission trip to Panama and work with new church plants in Panama. And I had been there once or twice before, and I knew the work was rugged and the conditions were difficult. And my first call was to John and Linda and said, would you go with me? And then I called my dad and a bunch of other friends. And the Lord opened the door for my dad and even John's dad and John and Linda and good friends from my home in Ohio, my hometown in Ohio, and friends from Victor. John, nice to see you, buddy. Good to see you. John went, and some guys from Clarence. And John and Linda, I'm going to read for you an excerpt from my dad's journal. My dad's 94. He sends greetings, respect, love. We're getting rid of stuff at my dad's house. I can't throw away some stuff. I can't throw it away. Okay, so this is what happened in Panama. I'm skipping through a whole bunch of stuff. This is my dad's words. Shortly after lunch, we loaded a church bus with about 10 Panamanian teenagers in the back and the rest of us, and we left the city of David on the Pan American Highway, driving approximately 2 hours. This road was like a state route in Ohio. Eventually, we turned left off the highway and went up about 6 miles to John's and Carice's favorite town in this hemisphere. It's named San Felix. We disembarked from the bus here. Actually, the town was only about 8 houses and about 3 stores and maybe 2 bars. The stores were quite dirty and very small, maybe 10 feet wide, 20 feet deep. Here, we went as far as we could. The kids said it was about 100 to 105 degrees there. Sounds about right. Here, the bus could go no further. We loaded ourselves and our gear onto 2 front four-wheel drives and a pickup truck, 4-wheel drive, and we loaded all our stuff up. As soon as we left the village of San Felix, the pavement stopped. The road became very rough. Stones, baseball size to pumpkin size. The road went up into the mountains and became quickly quite steep, and many ruts washed out the road. We were told that the road had only been built about 4 years ago by the people that lived there. Okay. I need to skip forward for just a second because John Montgomery, John Walker, and Linda are the only ones that remember this. Okay, so we worked that afternoon. Then, about 5 p.m., we stopped work and the whole group began a hike to a village for supper and a worship service. The term hike does not describe what we experienced. We went single file across the dirt road, started down a small path led by the locals. After about 1,000 feet, there was a wooded, partly grassy area, and the path opened to a beautiful view of the mountains with the sun hitting on it. I can't estimate well, but I'd say the valley is 25 miles long. It was one of those scenes that is really indescribable. Sun shining, mountains, all that stuff. I'm skipping ahead. From this point, the trail was treacherous, steep, loose rock, switchbacks every 10 to 20 feet, Some places you just slid down the trail. The trail must have dropped at least 2,000 feet in about 2 miles. When it finally flattened out, we went through a kind of a jungle and finally to the Indian hut. It was dark when we arrived, and my flashlight had given out. There were probably 25 of us that hiked down and about 140 people maybe that were there. We couldn't tell in the dark. After coming down the path that I could barely walk, single file along a grassy precipice, I found that the locals, young men, had carried down a generator, 100-pound bag of rice, a large box of dinner supplies, a large cooler of Kool-Aid full of good water, and a movie projector. And I heard myself saying, these people must think we're very wimpy. Unbelievable. Well, my dad goes on, and he describes that night for us. And John and Linda and John, it comes back to you probably as I'm starting to read that. It's unforgettable. But one generator lit one light, and it was John's turn to preach. I mean, we just kind of rotated through, but this was the first night, and it was John's turn to preach. And things were going swimmingly. I remember how much Linda enjoyed the cuisine that night. She's often remarked about that being maybe her favorite meal of all time. And the rest of us kind of concur. Well, John began to preach. This is my favorite John Walker message of all time. I've heard a bunch, not as many as you guys have, but a bunch. John was preaching away, using the manuscript as he usually does, and suddenly the generator stopped and the light went out. And to the population, it was just another night of life. To us gringos, it was like, where's my mom at? I need my teddy bear. And then this voice from John says, okay, now what do I do? And our host missionary was Kevin Dooley, and he said, keep preaching. And I'm sorry, I don't remember what happened next. It was a disaster for us, we thought, but for those people, gringos coming to their village was probably something they talked about for a long, long time. I consider John one of the most intelligent guys I know. Sometimes I wonder, though, how smart he really is. Because I keep asking him to do things with me, really, really dumb things. And he keeps saying, yes, okay, I'll try. So together we've traveled to Nicaragua and Mexico and the Dominican Republic and Panama a couple times. We went to serve and help advance the kingdom thinking we could do something, and maybe we did, but the biggest effect was on me and John and those who went. We, of course, received far more than we gave, right? Something we'll never forget. On our first trip to Nicaragua, we visited a prison on a break day in an afternoon, and it was a few miles outside of Managua, maybe 15 or so, and just like a year before, that prison was filled with prisoners from the conflict between, remember, the Contras and the Sandinistas, and political prisoners were held in this prison and treated horribly, and now the prison was empty. And I don't know all about that, but we were privileged to walk through that prison, and we did so mostly silently. Dark, grim cells, concrete, iron bars, graffiti on the walls, and other stuff, I'm not sure what. Prisoners, many of them spent their last moments of life in that horrible place. Very sobering. So we kind of walked silently back to the van, and I remember mentioning to John and the group, but mostly to John, some of the best known people in the Bible spent time in a prison just like that. I think that's all I said. And that opened the door for John to discuss the letters that Paul wrote from prison. And what followed was a master's class on Philippians and Colossians, Philemon and Philemon and Ephesians, and man, it was golden, and people asked questions, and it was like one of those golden moments. Thank you. John and I have seen each other at our best maybe once or twice in this 42-year period, and at our worst way too many times. He showed me the key word is flexibility, and we wake up in the morning and say, Lord, make us equal to whatever is in front of us today. And no excuses, no complaints. Let's just go do this. And John, a bunch of us watched you and your brother and sister and mom deal with Jim's demise. And thank you. Thank you for modeling Christ even on the hardest days. Golden. We watched and we learned. And it's my turn now. On the way home from Nicaragua, our flights were changed. Somehow, we found ourselves in Guatemala. How did we end up there? I do not know. While waiting for our plane, and a representative from Aviateca Airlines walked around and was distributing business cards to us. And this is what it said on the business card. Aviateca Airlines. Sometimes, in spite of our best efforts, we cannot avoid certain difficulties. We thank you for your understanding and hope to serve you better next time. Have a nice day. And so I think John and I together found that anywhere we are is the mission field, right? The old song, Brighten the Corner Where You Are, has been modeled for you by John and Linda. Let me read for you a piece of scripture. I think I'm through 2 minutes of my Central American. Though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, but though I am free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak, to win the weak I have become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do this all for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Thank you. You did that. You're doing that. We're watching and we're learning. Okay, so one of my heroes on a mission trip is a guy named Gumby. I take Gumby with me everywhere I go. I give an award out. This guy was really flexible today. The last time I was with John in Mexico, Gumby wound up in the rafters of this church building in Pachuca, Mexico. He's still smiling. Gumby's still smiling, I think. He's still up there. But he got up there because, well, we stopped being flexible for a short time. That's another story. No time to talk about shovels and mixing concrete and rice and beans and sickness and top 10 mistakes we've made in Spanish. The long night, when John used a Spanish word he never thought he would ever need or ever use, and that word is, I'll let John tell you. No, I'll let Linda tell you. No, I'm going to tell you. The word that John learned and thought he would never use in Spanish in a million years, the word is naked. Yeah, that word. I just put him in a bad spot. Now he has to explain that sometime. Are my 5 minutes up yet? No matter what. Central America, think Central America. Let's play suppose. John, from me to you, if I could get the attention of the entire world for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, let's say 10, that they would all stop and they could hear in their own language one guy with a microphone so everybody in the world could hear the same thing in their own language. this one guy explaining God's love and God's purpose for them, and they only have 10 minutes, and all the world's listening, I would choose you to make the presentation. Yeah. You'd be my first choice for any speaking event. Willowbrook has been blessed with one of the best Bible preachers and one of the best kept secrets in this generation, I believe. You have set the bar so high. And you can't say things like this. You won't say things like this. It would not be fitting for any minister to say this about himself, but Paul said it about himself. He said this in 1 Thessalonians 2:10. It has been your job description, John, and your mission, and now your achievement. To Willowbrook and to Clarence, from all of us, I think this is John. You are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were when we lived among you who believe. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory. John, from me to you. Linda, from me to you. Thank you for encouraging, comforting, and urging us to live lives worthy of God. Well done, good and faithful servants.
Hello, my name is Kice Walker. I am John Walker's daughter. I feel that an introduction may not be necessary, though, as I've been mentioned in a sermon or two, or three, or four over the years. A couple of weeks ago, Dad invited me on stage with him and gave me the chance to rebut anything I wanted to from his years of storytelling and use of family illustrations and sermons. In that moment, I said there was enough time. So I would like to take this opportunity now to clear up everything that has ever been said. I'm just kidding. There still isn't enough time. It would probably take less time to just confirm the stories that were actually true. Like, I did try to baptize Jess in the kiddie pool in our backyard when we were little. Dad did, in fact, make me eat a couple of bites of anchovy pizza, thinking that it was sausage. Jess, who, as a child, had made the decision to never drink alcohol because Dad never would, did drop his head and raise his hand when Dad asked the congregation who would be disappointed if they saw him at a restaurant having a beer with his lunch after assembly. And then when Dad asked, "But who of you would sit down and have a drink with me?" he saw tiny little Jess sitting there, head down, shaking his head sadly, hand in the air, still raised. And yes, Mom does make the best baklava. Being talked about from the stage is way different than being the one on the stage talking. So here we go. Being a minister, people say, it must be nice having a job that you only work one day a week. And although funny and maybe true for some, that statement could not be more wrong about John Walker. He did Christmas Eve services too, and those didn't always fall on Sundays. But seriously, Dad did not just write sermons and preach on Sundays. He would counsel, mentor, perform weddings, do vow renewals, parent dedications, baptisms, tear down and set up the chairs in this room, sit in waiting rooms, make hospital visits, go to calling hours, officiate funerals, tear down and set up the chairs in this room, go to games, concerts, shows, recitals, ceremonies, graduations, meetings, parties, potlucks, tear down and set up the chairs in this room, clean the church building, change the sign out front, prepare classrooms for programs, empty the donation shed, shovel the sidewalks, plow the parking lot, cut the grass, tear down and set up the chairs in this room, Work election day, ring bells for Salvation Army, help the hang around Victor Day, participate in pulpit exchange and Unity Fest, tear down and set up the chairs in this room. Dean at camp, staff at camp, speak at camp, do dishes at camp, tear down and set up the chairs in this room, play softball, play volleyball, play pickleball, play big scum, help people move, provide transportation, be at the airport for arrivals and departures, tear down and set up the chairs in this room. Teach classes, lead Bible studies, travel for youth trips, speak at conferences, go on mission trips, tear down and set up the chairs in this room. And that's not including the emergencies and the unexpected happenings, meetings that went hours longer than planned, random knocks on our front door at any hour of the day, phone calls in the middle of the night. There's never a time when John Walker is off the clock. If there's a need, Dad is there. If there's an opportunity, Dad is there. If there's a way to give, a way to serve, a way to help, Dad is there. And as a preacher and a teacher, John Walker is the best there is. God has clearly gifted him in communication through spoken word and written text. His understanding of Scripture and ability to communicate is unparalleled. He makes sure that every verse, every story, every footnote, every word, every inflection, every attempt at a joke is on point. Dad explains truth in a way that is both understandable and applicable. He does so in a very engaging and entertaining way. Dad has never stopped learning and growing. He never plateaued at any point in his years of ministry saying, I know enough to write some sermons, teach some classes, and counsel people, now I'm good. Nope. He's made it a priority to always be strengthening his relationship with Jesus, deepening his understanding of Scripture, and allowing God to develop in him the guy that God made him to be. Dad is intentional about spending time with Jesus, becoming like Jesus, and doing the things that he did. Dad has always said that parents can't hide their true selves from their kids. Your kids know the real you. So, I just want to tell everyone here that John Walker is the real deal. He is the same guy at home as he is anywhere else. And contrary to some of my journal entries in high school, when I was less than excited about being a preacher's kid, because I saw your selflessness through a very self-centered lens. And it has been your consistent example that I always saw the same thing, I just eventually learned to interpret it correctly. And now, one of the highest forms of compliments that I can receive is being told that I sound just like my dad, or that what I'm doing is totally what my dad would do, or when someone thinks something that I wrote was actually written by Dad. And it's now when I'm trying to help someone understand who Jesus is and experience his life-giving goodness, I always think, if I could just introduce you to my dad, if I could just get you to hang out with him, you couldn't help but see Jesus. Because doing life with John Walker leads you towards Jesus. Whether you're sitting in a class listening to him teach and pray, or on the field or on the court, hearing him cheer and encourage, digging a ditch in a foreign country and doing riddles with him, seeing him recognize a need and watching him jump in to serve, witnessing the way he loves people, John Walker is always pointing you to Jesus. Being a minister is not a job to him. It's not a lifestyle for him. It's who he is. Dad, it is a privilege to be your daughter and to have the unique, up-close, inside perspective that God has given me of doing life and ministry that comes with that. Billy Graham said, "Our lives speak loudly to those around us, especially the children in our home. You have shown me who it is that you trust, who it is that you love, who it is that you serve, who it is that you respect, and who it is that you follow. And in doing so and leading by example, you have helped me to do the same. It is an honor to serve alongside of you, loving Jesus and loving others my whole life." Yes, this celebration is absolutely about Dad, and it is absolutely about my mom. If she wasn't who she is, Dad wouldn't be who he is. In the very beginning, excuse me, when Dad was hired straight out of college to preach for a little church in Victor, New York, Mom worked a full-time job to help afford their basic cost of living, and in doing so, to help make Dad's ministry possible. Then, when they decided to start a family, she willingly chose to give up her career in order to stay home with Jess and me, make our house a home for the four of us, and pour everything she had into our family, while affording Dad the freedom to continue ministering. And early on, when they thought that their best shot at helping Jess and me grow up with Jesus at the center of our lives was to homeschool us, Mom took on the incredible responsibility of our education at a time when that was not only unpopular, but it was not understood and actually frowned upon. During those years, she still continued to serve in so many ways, from using their home to host Bible studies and babysitting nights, to give other parents a date night, to making dinner every week for the elders before their meetings. and sewing personalized quillos for each high school graduate in the church, to leading music on Sunday mornings and teaching Bible school classes, cooking and staffing at Mountain View Christian Camp, leading ladies groups and playing on the church's softball team, to going on youth trips as a sponsor even before her own kids were old enough to go themselves, and baptizing many of our friends who looked up to her as their Christian role model. Later, CCV, Church of Christ at Victor, believed that God could use us to do even more good for his kingdom if we moved into a bigger building and a more central location in the community. And we headed into what we called Project Expansion, which was the fundraiser established to build this building. It was at that time, and solely for that purpose, that Mom went back to work. She intentionally took a paid position to support that mission and gave everything that she made to that cause. Mom has been selfless and sacrificial in countless ways as she has partnered with and supported Dad through his entire 40-plus years of ministry. When ministry is rewarding, our family celebrates those joys, and when ministry is hard, which it is a lot of the time, that weight is also felt by our whole family, and Mom has shared in that burden. Mom has experienced the highs and the lows, the successes and disappointments, the awful moments and the awesome moments. It takes a very special kind of woman who is first wholeheartedly committed to Jesus and second fully committed to her husband to be a preacher's wife. And that's definitely who you are, Mom. You are exceptional. Funny how you said you were never going to marry a preacher's son, you were never going to marry a preacher, and you were never going to marry a John. Yet here you are. In her defense, she did not know that Dad was a preacher's kid when they met. He was planning on being a professor at a Bible college when they were engaged, and she says that his name is actually Jonathan, not the normal John with an H. Mom, as much as you didn't think this would be your future, it is because of your relationship with Jesus that you are exactly the woman that God made for Dad, and were instrumental in helping him to be and allowing him to be the man he is. You play one of the most significant roles in why we are all here today. Thank you. And yes, as much as this celebration is about Dad and about Mom, it is also about this church. C.S. Lewis talks about how in each of his friends, there is something that only some other friend can fully bring out. He explains that there are sides to each of us that will only be brought out when we are with other individuals who draw that part out of us, meaning that we only get to know and enjoy each other in the fullest way when everyone is in it together. Yes, John Walker would have had all of this amazing potential built within him, but without the church, he would not have been able to live out who God created him to be the fullest. It's the church, the people, his friends and family who have encouraged him, supported him, challenged him. We know who we are. Helped him develop and grow, enriched his life, and blessed him wildly. This includes pickleball folks. Dad brags about you often and genuinely lights up when he talks about all of you. And he doesn't refer to you as pickleball players or the pickleball community. No, he calls you his pickleball friends. Also, I want to thank you for taking some of the spotlight off of me in sermons over the past few years. He has been telling a lot of pickleball stories lately, and I appreciate it. This whole party seems a little backwards in some ways. It would be more appropriate for my family to stand up here and honor each of you, as we are the ones who have benefited for a lifetime and into eternity, and truly owe you all. It was a big deal when Dad brought up the idea of retirement to the elders more than 2 years ago, saying that he believed it was in the best interest of our church to start looking for the next guy in order to make the healthiest transition we could. Jacob, you have not only made this possible, but promising. Dad can feel confident, hopeful, and at peace because you are the guy who got arranged to lead Willowbrook next. Having you and Tristan here is one of the greatest blessings God has ever given us. We are very excited to do life with you and your family and are honored that you would choose to serve us and serve with us. Also, a little shout out to Ethan. I just want to say that I know what it's like to be a preacher's kid, and not only that, but the preacher's kid of this church. So I'm here for you, bud. Lastly, I really wanted there to be some way that Grandpa Walker, my dad's father, Jim Walker, could be a part of this special day. So I found a moment in time, captured on video, that I thought would be appropriate to share. In Grandpa's speech at his own retirement party back in 2000 after preaching for the Clarence Church of Christ for 31 years, He said there are 4 preachers who had played a major role in shaping his faith and his attempt to serve Jesus the best he could. Let's watch.
Minister and worked at Mountain View Camp coming from Painted Post. The 4th man most influential in my life is my preacher son Jonathan. His total commitment to the Lord's work, his careful study of God's Word, his devotion to helping men and women understand who Jesus is, has inspired me and helped me to understand the high standard to which we are all called. His love for Linda and the children is a beautiful thing to see from my vantage point, kind of from the inside out. I have often sought John's advice and his wisdom and his insights concerning churches, concerning situations in people's lives. His work at our church camp is dead on target. I really like working beside him. Like Mike, when John is on the team, I feel confident that it will be fruitful and it will be well done. John is a preacher who does his homework and whose sermons are clear and inspirational and aimed straight at all of us who are the product of the American culture. John, I totally enjoy your rapid-fire delivery, your humor-punctuated presentations of the gospel. I envy your ability and always wished I could be more like you. Your 18 years at Victor and the victories won for Jesus in the lives of men and women is one of my greatest inspirations in life. Linda's homeschooling, Kice and Jesse, including both academics and character development, have been wonderful to see. I have tried through the years to limit
Dad, you have 2 good fathers in heaven who love you and who are so proud of you. You have a family who is overwhelmed by God's goodness in giving you to us. And you have a life full of friends who are grateful for you and are better for knowing you. A.W. Tozer said, "What comes into your mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you?" And Dad, you clearly think the highest of him. You have taught us so many things and equipped us with so much truth over the years. And as they say in Princess Bride, let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up. You have taught us so many things like, he who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. If you're not going in the house, get off the porch. Every time people do what Jesus tells them to, they find him trustworthy. We believe something when we act on it as if it were true. Sacrifice means giving up something you love for something you love more. Jesus' view of generosity is what you give compared to what you have. Parenting is so everyday. But don't give up, never surrender. The preciousness of others. Be connected to people. If you don't know their names, you have less a chance of telling them his. The universality of spirituality is not an abnormality, but rather demonstrates a commonality superseding nationality, personality, or locality. And since Jesus says our immortality is sure eventuality, there's a certain rationality to working hard and decreasing our brutality and criminality, to enhancing the centrality of our hospitality, functionality, frugality, intentionality, and punctuality. In other words, there is a heaven and there is a hell, so there is a hurry. And what we're talking about isn't a matter of life or death. It's way more important than that. And never doubt in the dark what you've seen in the light. Thank you for loving Jesus. Thank you for deciding to trust him. And thank you for choosing to use the time that you have been given thus far to help us all do the same. Well done, Dad. So well done.
Linda, can you come up here too, please? As Carice said, it's what you get for being at CIY and throwing Jessica and I under the bus when we thought we were all in trouble. Yes, we thought we were getting in trouble with the CIY people, and instead of being the grown-up in the room, she took her cookie and hid in the closet. Thank you. It's just a little treat for both of you to take home and enjoy. There's one more important part coming. It's just not here on time. There will be a photo album coming your way to remember your years here with us. Thank you.
Can you come back? Only because as we're giving out baskets of gifts, one didn't make it into the basket, but this is a corporate gift from all of us at Willowbrook to you. Thank you forever.
Is this it? I didn't want to do this, and by this I mean give a speech. I don't like making speeches. Seinfeld once said that there are two things Americans fear the most. Number one, public speaking. Number two, death. And he then said that means at a funeral, more people would prefer to be in the casket than delivering the eulogy. I feel like that now. I don't like making speeches. I was asked to make a speech at a Thanksgiving banquet for another church. Nearby, they said, why don't you come and eat with us and then talk afterwards, proving that they obviously don't know anything about speaking. If you're going to speak later, you can't possibly eat first. So I was sitting at the table with a bunch of people I didn't know there. They asked me who I was, what I did. I said, I'm the preacher from Willowbrook Christian Church. They said, whoa, we get to sit with the evening's guest speaker. Nice. They said, how long have you been a preacher? I said, 25, 30 years. I don't know. They said, whoa, that's a long time. You must really love talking in front of people. I said, nope, not at all. Absolutely one of my least favorite things in the world. They said, what? I said, it's terrifying. It makes me so that I want to pee my pants and I can't spit. One lady sitting at the table looked at me and she said, mister, you're in the wrong business. And as I sat there waiting my turn tonight, I realized how right she is, yet again. I don't like making speeches. In fact, that's why I don't make speeches. I write them and then I stand up when it's time and I read them as fast as I can, with varying degrees of success, as indicated by responses I get after I make my speeches. Like once, a man walked up to me and he shook my hand and he said, John, today's sermon was like water to a drowning man. At first, that sounded like a compliment, kind of, but then the more I thought about it, no. One junior high girl walked out after I spoke at camp at the end of the week after I preached every night, and she walked out of the chapel on the last night. She said, Mr. Walker, I finally figured it out. Your sermons aren't really long. They just feel that way. I think she meant it in a good way. I didn't want to do this. And by this, I mean be a preacher. I didn't want to do this at all. My dad was a preacher. I watched Dad deal with all that. Hours of study, hours spent talking with people whose lives are blowing up, hours teaching, hours administrating, hours of building maintenance, hours in the hospital. So many times Dad would be called away when we were sitting together as a family at a meal, leaving Mom to deal with us all by herself. And then hearing people joke with him, must be nice to only have to work 1 hour a week. Or hearing people actually say, no, really, give me 5 bullet points of what you did last week. I didn't want to do this, but I did want to get married, and I didn't have a job. So when a church in Victor called my dad in Buffalo, and they said, we're looking for a new minister, we would like him to be about 35, 40 years old, married, have 2 or 3 kids, 15 years of preaching experience, good with people, and cheap. Do you know anybody who fits that bill? And Dad said, well, I might know somebody who's cheap. They said, close enough. That was my call to ministry. They invited me to come preach a trial sermon. I knew Linda didn't want to be a preacher's wife. I asked her, is it okay if we try this for a while? She said, we can try it. I didn't have a trial sermon to preach. I didn't have any sermon. So I took one of Dad's. And I preached it, word for word, just like he'd written it. And afterwards, they said, good sermon, you're hired. And the surprising part is not that they hired me on Dad's sermon, but that we're still here. At pickleball the other day, a friend heard that I'd been a preacher for one church for 42 years, and she said, how have you stayed at one place for so long? And I said, nobody asked me to leave. And by nobody, I mostly mean Linda. Footnote. Do you have time for a footnote? Being the wife of a preacher is not easy because your children's most inappropriate behaviors keep showing up as sermon illustrations the next Sunday. And because the health of your marriage is one of the factors in your husband's annual performance review. So you kind of answer to the church even though they did not hire you. And that has led to some existentially challenging moments for preachers' wives. Like, did you hear about the wife who was upstairs and she yelled down to her husband, hey, do you ever get shooting pains in your body like somebody's got a voodoo doll of you and is stabbing it? And her husband yelled back, no. And it was quiet for a moment. And then she said, how about now? Far as I know, Linda has never stuck needles into anything in anger, and I am so lucky. Did you hear about the guy at the funeral who walked up to where the widow was sitting and he asked if he could say a word? And she said, okay. And he went to the podium and the guy said, plethora. And then he went back and sat down next to her and she leaned over and she said, thanks, that means a lot. Sometimes when I was out trying to help someone, Linda would send me a text and all it would say is, you are a good pastor. Such encouragements meant a lot. I've heard it said that behind every successful man is a very surprised mother-in-law. I am lucky. I have had supportive in-laws and supportive siblings and interesting kids who have hung with me through it all, and a wife who has cheered for me while I was downstairs writing or while I was out there being a minister. I say all that to honor Linda and to encourage you to be extra nice to Tristan. End of footnote. But while we're here, I have one more thing to say about that. About me not wanting to preach anymore. Perhaps some of you heard that I'm kind of happy about retiring. I'm not sure where you got that idea, but here's why I am, and I am. I'm giddy about not doing this anymore. You people are great. This congregation is full of servant-hearted, Jesus-loving, for-real Christian people. Tim Keller used to say that most people don't become Christians because they've never met one, not a real one. But you people are, and I am so glad that my daughter and my son got to grow up with you guys pointing them to Jesus. God intended everyone to be part of a church. That is what Jesus thinks is best for everyone, and you are a great church to be part of. Plus, you are wildly generous. You arranged for me to drive at the Pocono Speedway. You shipped us off to Hawaii for the first time. You do not make me eat Jell-O molds with fruit things in them at potlucks. This church is so good, and we are sitting in the middle of 100,000 opportunities to do lots more good, but I'm the wrong guy. There are young families with little kids all around this building, and when they walk in and they look at me, they say, wow, dude, you're old. They say, you're so old, you probably play pickleball, huh? And I say, and I'm good at it. I was not old when I started, but I am old now, which is why I'm finished. So I asked God, would he please find somebody really young and really good to take my place? And after a year of looking, we found Jacob and Tristan, or more like they found us, or more like God beautifully arranged for Jacob to start tomorrow. And I would like to invite all of you to come be here to listen to him as he starts tomorrow. He will be the 5th preacher that this church has ever had. And Jacob, if you would come up here for a minute, I have something to give you. In fact, I have 2 things to give you. One is a book authored by our church's first preacher ever. Mr. Gill wrote a book. And according to many people that I respect, he was, oh yeah, please come up. Mr. Gill was genius, but I was too little to appreciate his genius. I thought he was old and boring. You can read this book that he wrote and benefit from it or not, but it is now part of your heritage. And, what? And,
that's not the book, is it?
this is the,
Okay.
and right here it says he is the present minister at Victor, New York, but he is not. You are. Wait, I got one more. The other thing I have for you is larger, and it's a printer. Because I really want you to have the way to produce your sermon so that you can always preach so that I don't have to. Or so that you can write a book. You can write your own book. Or you can write letters, or whatever you think will help most connect the young families that God will put in front of us over the next many years with Jesus. I hope that this printer helps you. Thank you for coming. I am so very happy that you're here. You can go. I really didn't want to do this. And by this, I mean this party. This is ridiculous. This is so ridiculous. When Marissa said, we're doing this, I said, we're not doing this. But she said, we're doing this. And I said, Marissa, we had one of these 2 years ago. She said, we're going to do this. I said, we are so not going to do this. She said, talk to your daughter. I said, Kice, there is not going to be a party. She said, sorry, Dad, there's going to be a party. I said, babe, it's embarrassing. She said, I know. I said, honoring me like that, like I matter in some special way, is bad theology. She said, I know. I said, there are hundreds of people who've been part of what our church has accomplished over all these years who should be honored instead of me. She said, I know. I said, we're not going to do this. She said, Dad, this party is not for you. It is for all those people. They'll get together and see each other and hug each other and tell stories and encourage each other, and it will be a great party. It's for them. It's not for you. And she said, you can invite your pickleball friends, and they can meet our church. I said, there's no way out. She said, afraid not. So I went and told Marissa, okay, let's do this. And she said, oh, I love your daughter. She knows how to handle you. Which is probably true. So please know that for me, being here tonight is not just a great honor, which it is, but it's also rather inconvenient. I told my sister, they want me to give a speech. I thought I was done last week. She said, they want you to give a speech? Oh, good. I said, no, not oh, good. I'm so done. She said, what are you going to say? I said, I have no idea. She said, how about be good, do good, God bless, go Bills. I said, ooh, Jen, that is so good. She said, no. Tell 3 jokes and then say thank you. I decided I would do that. I know most of you have heard most of these before, but here goes. Joke number 1. I heard about a mom who was talking to her son, and she said, Thomas, do you think I'm a bad mother? And her son answered, my name is Paul. I would like to publicly thank my mother for not being like that. Joke number 2. Which part of the Bible is only 80% truth? Which part of the Bible is only 80% truth? Ruth. That is one of my all-time favorites because it incorporates scripture and math. But mostly, it's my favorite because then I can go on to say how I have bet my entire life on the Bible being 100% true, and that Jesus' offer to cover us and to train us in how to do life is 100% the best deal I know, and how that is the reason that I have prot for so long. You know, teach, taught, preach, prot. That is why I have prot for so long and why I play pickleball so entertainingly, all in the hopes that somehow, some way, everyone I meet will end up with Jesus as well. Jess texted me before my last sermon on Sunday last week, and he said, I am praying for everyone there and for those that are watching that God will use this opportunity to help people connect with him more. Jess said, Dad, you have given him so many opportunities to help people do that through the work you've done over all this time, and I know that you'll continue to do so just in a different way now. He wrote, I am so amazed at what you have done for the kingdom and thankful for who you are and the incredible example that you are for me and for so many others. I love you, Dad. Congratulations on your great career of service. And guys, I don't know what you're shooting for in life, but to be living with Jesus and on your way to heaven with kids who are in with you, to me that seems like a pretty good thing. I really hope you're doing that, or at least heading in that direction. Like Jonah, I really didn't want to do any of this, any of it. But I'm glad I did. Last joke, ever. I heard a story about a lady named Gladys Dunne, D-U-N-N-E, who decided she wanted to try out a new church one Sunday to see what the people there were like. So she drove into the parking lot, she walked into the building, she sat down in a pew. No one said anything to her the whole time. The music started, the music was nice. The preacher started to preach, he was okay, but he went on, long. He went on and on and on. I mean, it was a really long sermon, really long. And she looked around, and the people around her didn't seem to really be into the sermon. They seemed pretty bored, but they all sat there and listened as he droned on and on and on. When the assembly was finally over, she turned to the man sitting behind her, and she said, "Hi, I'm glad it's done." And the man said, "Oh, I am so too." So we had a party. You're welcome. But really, for all the good stuff that we have done together to get here, I thank you. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you. But like Josh says at the end of every season, well, that was good, but we still got lots more to do. Let's. And really, for the last time, this time, I'm dismissed.